Hello everyone! Today we have some amazing news. Camilla has blocked Harry and Meghan's return to the royal family. Why can't King Charles help them? 7 years before the wedding and 3 years in marriage, a detail from Meghan Markle's past that is not discussed. Royal eugenics? Meghan Markle, how to turn a medical norm into a scandal. The most interesting thing awaits you ahead, but for now, let's start with the news that Camilla blocked Harry's return and Meghan is joining the royal family. The royal family! This is an eternal source of inspiration for tabloids, neurosurgeons at heart, strangers of course, and anyone who has ever wondered, is it possible to be too rich and too unhappy at the same time? For the past few weeks, our small but proud secular world has been literally seething with rumors. The air rang with anticipation, worthy of the final of the Olympic Games of intrigue. Prince Harry, the prodigal son and indefatigable content provider, was supposedly on the verge of a triumphant return. Yes, you heard right. The media, the same ones that enthusiastically broadcast every shocking attack of the Sussexes, suddenly began to sing a different song. From more or less mundane publications to frankly fantastic chronicles, everyone was talking about the upcoming reunion. Some claimed that Harry just wants to establish a normal relationship with his father, and at the same time with the whole family, which in itself sounds like an oxymoron, given the story. Others, not at all shy about epithets and fantasies, happily reported that Meghan Markle was already flipping through the catalogs of leading couturiers, choosing outfits for her triumphant return to London. Can you imagine? At that moment, all the Windsors probably had migraines. Of course, there is no smoke without fire, even when it comes to the coldest hearths of the British monarchy. And Harry, the restless truth seeker, actually met Charles III. While Harry is dating Carl, I remind you that there is great news ahead. Continue. For the first time in 19 months of coordination, negotiations, and diplomatic maneuvers worthy of meeting the heads of two warring states, not a loving father and his, well, not exactly a loving son. And now the moment has come. The curtain went up, the expectation reached its climax, and what did we get? The meeting lasted only 54 minutes. 54! During this time, you can have time to drink a cup of tea, without much ceremony, exchange a couple of polite phrases about the weather, and maybe even scroll through the newsfeed. But there is no way to heal long-standing wounds, to establish normal relations, and even more so to prepare a springboard for the triumphant return that one odious duchess so dreams of. However, Harry would not have been Harry if he had not used the opportunity for his usual boastful manner. He immediately told the press that the date with his father was so warm and emotional that they almost burst into tears on each other's shoulders. Oh, those heartbreaking scenes. That's exactly how it seems. Two crowned men embracing in tears while the fog thickens over London outside the window. And then an innocent but obsessive question arises. What if it was staged? Or just a very, very rich imagination? Fortunately, there are people in the world whose informants work not for scandal fees, but for verified facts. One of the regular royal insiders, whose data is always subsequently confirmed, which in itself is already an achievement in this world of fakes, shed light on the real state of affairs. It turned out that the meeting was by no means warm. She was very dry, prim, and generally passed in the presence of a third person. A third party! What a romance! What a dialogue of hearts! Who is this mysterious witness of such an intimate moment?
Most journalists, who did not miss the slightest detail, were inclined to believe that it could be none other than the private secretary of Charles III and Queen Camilla, Sir Clive Alderton. And that's when the whole picture of the family idol crumbles like a house of cards in the wind. Instead of an emotional reunion, we seem to have witnessed a formal exhortation. His Majesty, apparently for the umpteenth time, trying to convey to his wayward offspring the basic truth. Son, keep your mouth shut, and please stop slandering your relatives. If it doesn't reach you through other channels, you'll have to tell me personally. It sounds not so much like a manifestation of paternal love as like the last desperate gesture of a monarch tired of endless public tantrums. But the main question that hovers in the air, like the ghost of Princess Diana at another social event, is forgiveness possible? Well, is this a real royal pardon in which Harry and Meghan finally accept the rules of the game and stop promoting themselves at the expense of the Windsors? My dear reader, let me dispel your naive illusions. Definitely not. And here, it's not so much about the scandalous antics of Meghan Markle, who, after all, is secondary here, but about a much more powerful and influential figure. Prince Harry unknowingly, or perhaps unknowingly, but because of youthful maximalism, unaware of the scale of the disaster, has made himself a very, very powerful enemy, Queen Camilla. It's no secret that King Charles III is under the enormous, all-encompassing influence of this woman, to such an extent that some of the British, who have a special faith in the mystical, suspect her of witchcraft and the king's love spell. Laugh, don't laugh, but in Britain, this is serious talk. And even if we discard magic, we're talking about strong feelings of a man for a woman, feelings that have been preserved and strengthened over the decades, having withstood countless storms and scandals. And it was this fortress that Harry attacked. In his controversial book, Spare, he didn't just accuse Camilla Parker Bowles of playing a key role in the breakdown of her parents' marriage, he walked on, describing how he and William allegedly begged their father not to marry her, arguing that a wedding would cause controversy, incite the press, make the whole world talk about Mom, compare Mom and Camilla. Harry writes with his characteristic way of thinking. He would be very happy if Camilla just remained his father's mistress. It was necessary to blurt out such a thing. What's on your mind is on your tongue, as they say. Wish the future queen to remain forever that other woman? Question her right to legal status? In the eyes of the royal family, this is not just disrespect. This is the public humiliation of a woman who has gone through fire, water, and copper pipes of public censure to finally find her place next to her lover. So what kind of forgiveness can we talk about when Harry's attempts to mend relations, apparently in order to regain access to royal privileges, are on one side of the scale, and the deep public resentment of the Queen, whose husband is ready to do anything for her peace and dignity, is on the other? Does anyone seriously believe that Camille, after all that has been said and written, will calmly allow the prodigal son to return, and even more so, will allow his wife to arrange her triumphant exits again? Let me naively wonder. Harry doesn't seem to realize at all that real queens, even if they were once mistresses, don't forgive everything. And even more so, they do not forgive those who publicly cast a shadow on their status and decades of devotion. So, dear gossip fans, don't wait for new photos of Meghan at Westminster Abbey.
It is much more likely that Prince Harry will continue his warm and emotional conversations with his father exclusively through press releases, and the royal forgiveness will remain only a mirage hanging over the cold mists of English gardens. Because there are things in the world that no exclusive interviews, no memoirs, and no promises of keeping my mouth shut can buy. And now we come to the main news for today. But the next news is also no less wonderful, so watch to the end. 7 years before the wedding and 3 years in marriage. A detail from Meghan Markle's past that Hollywood doesn't discuss. A place where fairy tales are written as easily as scripts for TV series, and the truth is sometimes harder to find than diamonds on the red carpet after the Oscar ceremony. And of course, our favorite source of endless stories, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, never ceases to give us food for thought. The official version says Meghan and her first husband, Trevor Engelson, had no children. Why? Yes, because the marriage, they say, lasted not for long, from 2011 to 2014, and ended on a sad note of insurmountable differences. Well, that sounds pretty Hollywood, doesn't it? A kind of dramatic arc where the characters, alas, did not find joint offspring, but gained freedom. But as you know, where the official version ends, a real feast begins for inquisitive minds and sharp tongues. Especially ardent fans of the Duchess, the ones who are ready to justify any step she takes, even if it resembles a chess night lunge at the Opera House, will hasten to add. Meghan, they say, basically did not want to give birth to the hypocritical and vile Trevor Engelson. After all, he was so jealous of her commercial success in the series Force Majeure, where the future Duchess plunged headlong in 2011. This raises a rhetorical question that makes you want to naively throw up your hands. If Trevor was so unbearable, so hypocritical, and so mean, and Meghan, being a lady with principles, did not want offspring from him, why did she marry him at all? It's kind of completely illogical, don't you think? It's like complaining about the rain while standing in the open with an umbrella that you refuse to open on principle. And that's where the most interesting part of our story begins, worthy of a separate investigation, and not just gossip. They say that the devil is in the details, and it turns out that not only demons live in these details, but also inconvenient facts. The fact is that Meghan Markle and Trevor Engelson lived together for 7 years before their official marriage. 7 years, Carl. Or, sorry, reader. They met back in 2004. She's an actress, he's an aspiring producer who dreams of conquering Hollywood. Both are young, ambitious, and, as usual, liked each other. Although, to be completely honest, and perhaps a little more cynical, on Meghan's part, it might not have been a fancy, but rather a cold calculation. After all, who could be a better guide in the world of cinema than a beginner but already a promising producer? And as they say in the best novels, they moved in together almost immediately. Thus, if you add up 7 years of marriage, before marriage, and 3 years of official marriage, it turns out that Meghan Markle's relationship with her first husband lasted for 10 years. 10! It's a whole anniversary, worthy of at least a modest gift, but at most, a whole family. At the same time, at the time of the divorce, Meghan was 33 years old, and Trevor Engelson turned 36. They weren't exactly young. This is not the age when they don't even think about children, preferring to have fun parties and carefree trips around Ibiza. This is an age when most middle-class people are already in full swing with diapers, kindergartens, and a mortgage on a house with a kindergarten. So why didn't they have at least one child in the 10 years they lived together? Let's look at the versions that may pop up in your head and dispel them like a morning mist over the Thames. Meghan and Trevor were so poor that they couldn't afford to have a baby. Oh, how touching. It makes me cry. Of course, they were not super rich. This is not the royal family with its untold treasures, but my dears, they definitely belonged to the upper middle class of the United States. As they say in the best novels, they moved in together almost immediately. Thus, if you add up 7 years of marriage before marriage and 3 years of official marriage, it turns out that Meghan Markle's relationship with her first husband lasted for 10 years. 10! It's a whole anniversary, worthy of at least a modest gift, but at most a whole family. At the same time, at the time of the divorce, Meghan was 33 years old, and Trevor Engelson turned 36. They weren't exactly young. This is not the age when they don't even think about children, preferring to have fun parties and carefree trips around Ibiza. This is an age when most middle-class people are already in full swing with diapers, kindergartens, and a mortgage on a house with a kindergarten. So why didn't they have at least one child in the 10 years they lived together? Let's look at the versions that may pop up in your head and dispel them like a morning mist over the Thames. Meghan and Trevor were so poor that they couldn't afford to have a baby. Oh, how touching. It makes me cry. Of course, they were not super rich. This is not the royal family with its untold treasures, but my dears, they definitely belonged to the upper middle class of the United States. Until 2011, Meghan starred mainly in cameo roles, the fees for which, perhaps, she paid for the monthly expenses of a stylist. Trevor Engelson himself worked in a very well-paid position as a producer in Hollywood. A Hollywood producer and poverty? Well, it's kind of like royal modesty. It sounds beautiful, but in reality, it is extremely rare. So, alas, this version breaks down into the harsh realities of California salaries. The second version. Meghan Markle was strenuously building a career, and she had no time to have children. Well, the noble pursuit of self-realization is wonderful,
But let's be honest. From 2004 to 2011, before the very series Force Majeure, which finally pulled her out of the category of an actress I've seen somewhere but I don't remember where, Meghan Markle starred mainly in cameo roles. Minor or even minor films, one-time appearances in entertainment programs. Was she so busy that she didn't even have enough time for pregnancy and the birth of a child? Or perhaps it wasn't so much career building as endless auditions in anticipation of that finest hour. For example, I get the impression that there might have been plenty of time, but the priorities were set differently. The third version. Meghan Markle and Trevor Engelson just didn't want children. But this is more interesting. Assuming that Meghan Markle herself didn't want to have children, then Trevor Engelson definitely couldn't wait for them. That's where the most telling detail lies. After Trevor Engelson got married for the second time in 2018, his new wife literally started having children one by one, 3 in 4 years. This, is quite eloquent evidence that Trevor Engelson's desire to have children was not just obvious, but was burning with a bright flame. And why didn't this flame flare up while he was with Meghan? The fourth version, and the main one. Meghan Markle cannot have children. But this version, my dears, is starting to sound louder and louder, especially when we turn to the most reliable sources, relatives. The half-brother of the Duchess of Sussex, Thomas Markle Jr., in a recent interview, which of course is unlikely to go down in the annals of diplomacy, claimed that Meghan Markle underwent surgery to remove her uterus at the age of 28. And half-sister Samantha even said that Meghan used frozen eggs in order to give birth to her son Archie with the help of a surrogate mother. Of course, the stories of Meghan Markle's relatives, who admittedly give the impression of people who are not quite adequate, should be treated with a certain skepticism. After all, you must admit they have repeatedly proved their penchant for dramatization and, let's say, creative reinterpretation of facts. But if we combine these revelations, which of course sound like a plot for a soap opera, with the current paternal happiness of her ex-husband, who literally bombarded the world with babies, then the facts obtained seem to unequivocally tell us that with the birth of children, the Duchess of Sussex may not be very clean. What do we have in the bottom line? A woman who had not given birth in 10 years of relationship with her first husband, whose subsequent marriage became a factory for the production of heirs. And kind relatives who hint at serious medical interventions and surrogacy. Were these insurmountable differences not so much in the sphere of characters as in the sphere of reproductive possibilities? Is there really a much more complicated and perhaps sad truth behind the brilliant facade of a Hollywood smile? Perhaps Harry, our romantic prince, who was so desperate for family happiness, didn't get the full picture? Or maybe he was ready to accept any truth, just to get away from the cold world of the Windsors and create his family, even if in such a not quite traditional way.
Questions. They hang in the air like an unsolved mystery, adding another layer of irony to this already confusing plot. Royal eugenics. Meghan Markle, how to turn a medical norm into a scandal. Oh, how I want to exclaim, well, finally! Meghan Markle has found a new reason for righteous indignation. This time, he's playing the role of the villains, modern medicine. Yes, the very prenatal examinations that millions of women around the world undergo have turned into torment for the Duchess of Sussex. So, according to another source close to the Duchess, I wonder if they have a union of anonymous informants there, poor Meghan was tormented by the requirement to undergo a standard examination for chromosomal abnormalities, the same screening that is recommended for all pregnant women over the age of 35. But no, in the case of Meghan, this is, of course, discrimination and cruelty of the royal family. The logic of the source is especially touching. They say that European royal houses are closely related, so the gene pool is meager, but what does Meghan have to do with it? She just brought fresh blood to this very gene pool. If anything, it was her child who had minimal risks of hereditary diseases compared to the descendants of centuries-old dynastic marriages.
But no, logic is not about Meghan. It is much more important to create an image of a sufferer who is forced to undergo trials. Trials? It's like we're talking about medieval torture, not ultrasound and blood tests. And now the most interesting thing. She hasn't talked about it yet, but she will. So this is another leak to the press, and this is such preparatory work. Warming up public opinion before the main show? Maybe for his memoirs. Oh, how unexpected. Who would have thought that Meghan would write a memoir and find room in them for more accusations? It is especially cynical to use the tragic story of Prince John, the forgotten prince, who really suffered from the cruel prejudices of the early 20th century. Back then, children with special needs were really hidden, shamed, isolated. But what does this story of 1919 have to do with modern medical protocols? However, for Meghan, any historical parallel is good if it helps to build a narrative about her own suffering. Did Prince John suffer from ignorance and prejudice from a century ago? So, the requirement to undergo a modern medical examination is a continuation of the same tradition of oppression. I wonder what Kate Middleton thinks about this. After all, she also underwent all these examinations during her 3 pregnancies. But for some reason, he doesn't consider it torment and doesn't complain to anonymous sources. Maybe it's because she understands the difference between taking care of a child's health and mythical royal conspiracies. But did Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie go through these trials too? Or does the evil tradition only apply to American actresses who married princes? The funny thing about this story is the attempt to present a standard medical procedure as something exceptional and discriminatory. Millions of women do these tests without any compulsion, simply because they want to know about the health of their children. But Meghan apparently believes that her special status frees her from such humiliations. However, there is a certain pattern in this story. Meghan expertly turns any situation into proof of her own victimhood. Do they require you to follow protocol? Racism. Are you being asked to undergo a medical examination? The torment. Criticized for another scandal? Harassment. One can only guess, but what will be the next reason for outrage? Maybe mandatory vaccination of children, or the requirement to wear a seatbelt in royal cars. In the meantime, sources close to the Duchess are preparing the ground for new revelations. The rest of the world continues to live by the principle that a child's health is more important than the ambitions of the parents, even if these parents have ducal titles and consider themselves victims of a universal conspiracy.